Hey guys, before I start, I need you to answer something honestly. If you heard someone screaming for help in the middle of the ocean, would you look? Because I did, and that was the biggest mistake of my life. I work on a cargo ship. My father told me to ignore the voices in the water, but I didn't listen. I have not been able to sleep for a long time. Every time I close my eyes, I feel the freezing water rushing over my head, and I see the dark expanse of the open ocean. I am typing this on a computer in a small room on land, far away from the coast. I'm writing this to honor my father, and I'm writing this to ask a question that has been destroying me from the inside out. I need to know if it is my fault that he is dead. My father and I worked together on a massive commercial container ship. Our job was manual labor. We were deckhands, responsible for securing the heavy steel shipping containers, checking the massive metal lashings, performing basic maintenance, and ensuring everything was tied down tight against the weather. The ship we worked on was gigantic. When you stand on the main deck and look from one end to the other, it feels like you are looking down a long metallic city block. Working on a ship like that means you live in a constant state of isolation. Once you leave the port, you see nothing but deep, dark water for weeks at a time. The world shrinks down to the metal deck under your boots, the towering stacks of containers, and the heavy, continuous vibration of the massive diesel engines running deep in the lower levels. My father loved the work. He had spent his entire life on the water. He had rough, heavily calloused hands and a quiet way of doing things. He always carried a small folding knife with a bright yellow handle in his front pocket. He used it for everything, from cutting thick nylon ropes to opening ration boxes. A few months ago, we were scheduled to pass through a very specific stretch of the open ocean. I did not know anything about this area of the water. The navigation crew kept the maps in the bridge, and the deckhands just followed the daily work schedule. But on the afternoon before we reached that specific coordinate, my father pulled me aside. We were standing near the stern, watching the white foam churning behind the massive propellers. He looked incredibly serious. The relaxed, easygoing posture he usually had while working was completely gone. "We are entering a bad stretch of water tonight," he told me. His voice was low, barely carrying over the sound of the engines. "You will be in it from sundown until the sun comes up tomorrow. I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to promise me that you will do exactly what I say." I nodded, confused by his intense tone. I asked him what was wrong with the water, assuming he meant we were heading into a severe storm or a rough current. "Do not look at the water tonight," he said, ignoring my question. "You keep your eyes on the steel deck. You keep your eyes on the containers. You can look up at the sky if you need to, but you do not walk to the railing and you do not look down into the water, no matter what happens, no matter what you hear." I stared at him. I asked him what he meant by what I might hear. He gripped my shoulder. His fingers dug hard into my jacket. "You are going to hear things over the side of the ship. You might hear strange noises or music or people talking. You ignore it. You focus on your work. You check the lashings and you stay away from the edge. Do you promise me?" I promised him. He let go of my shoulder, gave me a tight nod, and walked away to finish his tasks. My shift started at midnight. The ocean at night is an absolute suffocating kind of dark. There are no city lights reflecting off the clouds. The only illumination came from the harsh industrial floodlights mounted high up on the ship's superstructure, casting long, deep shadows between the rows of containers. The wind was cold and damp, biting through my heavy work jacket. I was working alone on the starboard side, checking the heavy turnbuckles that held the bottom layer of containers to the deck. I had a heavy metal wrench in my hand, testing the tension of the lashings. Around 2 in the morning, the sound of the wind changed. At first, I thought it was just the wind whistling through the narrow gaps between the corrugated steel boxes. But the sound grew louder, and it became organized. It was a song. It was a slow, melodic humming rising from the darkness over the edge of the ship. The melody was incredibly beautiful. It felt warm and inviting, completely at odds with the freezing industrial reality of the metal deck. The sound did not enter my ears normally. It felt like the humming was vibrating directly in the center of my brain. I stopped working. I lowered my wrench. A heavy, sluggish feeling washed over my body. I wanted to walk to the railing. I wanted to see where the music was coming from. Then I remembered the grip my father had on my shoulder. I remembered his strict order: do not look at the water. I forced myself to look down at my boots. I raised the heavy wrench and slammed it hard against the steel deck. The loud, sharp clanging of the metal broke my focus. I hit the deck again and again, creating my own harsh noise to drown out the melody. The humming stopped, and the normal sound of the wind and the deep rumbling of the ship's engines rushed back into my ears. I let out a long breath, my heart beating fast. I turned back to the turnbuckles, determined to finish my row and get back to the safety of the interior cabins. 10 minutes later, I heard the voice. It was not a song this time. It was a human voice yelling frantically from the darkness just over the side of the railing. "Help! Please, help me! I fell over the side! I can't swim!" I froze. The voice sounded incredibly clear. It sounded terrified and exactly like one of the younger crew members who worked in the engine room. I could hear the heavy splashing, the sound of someone thrashing desperately in the water as the massive ship moved past them. "Hey, please, throw a ring! I'm going under!" Every basic human instinct I possessed screamed at me to act. When someone is drowning, you don't think, you don't hesitate, you just move. I dropped my wrench, I turned around and sprinted towards the edge of the ship. I reached the metal railing and leaned over, looking directly down into the pitch-black water rushing along the hull. I expected to see a person struggling in the white foam. I saw absolutely nothing. The water was empty. I stood there gripping the cold metal rail, confused. The thrashing sound had stopped completely. The voice was gone. There was only the dark, rolling ocean. I realized my mistake a second too late. I felt a sudden massive shift in my center of gravity. I didn't slip, and the ship didn't pitch violently. It felt as though gravity itself simply reached out from the dark water and pulled me forward. My boots left the metal deck. I tumbled over the top of the railing, falling through the empty air. I hit the water hard. The cold was a physical shock that forced the air out of my lungs. The heavy work boots and the thick jacket I was wearing instantly became waterlogged, pulling me downward like lead weights. The salt water burned my eyes. I tumbled beneath the surface, completely disoriented in the darkness. I kicked my legs, trying to swim back up to where I thought the surface was, but the weight of my clothes was too much. I was sinking. I opened my eyes in the freezing water. Deep down below me, suspended in the absolute blackness, I saw a light. It was a small, perfectly round sphere of bright, warm light. It looked like a bare light bulb floating in an empty room. It bobbed gently in the water, radiating a soft, inviting glow. I stopped kicking. I stared at the light. A strange, heavy sense of calm washed over my panic. The urge to breathe faded. I felt a deep, overwhelming desire to stop fighting and simply let myself sink towards that warm, glowing sphere. As I drifted downward, my eyes began to adjust to the dim illumination cast by the glowing ball. I saw what was waiting in the dark space behind the lure. The glowing sphere was attached to a thick, fleshy stalk. The stalk grew out of a massive wall of dark, rough, mottled skin. The skin stretched out further than I could see, disappearing into the dark water on all sides. Directly below the glowing lure, the water was moving. The wall of skin was opening. It was a cavernous, circular mouth wider than a shipping container. The interior of the mouth was lined with dozens of concentric rings of long, curved, jagged teeth. The teeth were moving in slow, overlapping spirals